I grabbed the title from an article in the philosophy section of a newspaper, How We Lost the Sky. And Krista, I think it was last night or perhaps this morning, asked me, what are you preaching about? And I said, the title is How We Lost the Sky. And she said, what is it about? And I said, it's complicated. And she said, you'll have to come up with something better than that. So I hope I did. I'm not quite sure. I hope I'll be able to keep it together. The specific philosophy section of the newspaper sometimes has good articles, but I think I'm reaching the stage as I grow older where one naturally recalls a better era. And in this case, an era of better philosophers. Because so often when I read this these days, I think, wow, this is like social media. You know, it's not the real deal. It purports to be or create community, but it really doesn't do it. And I'm longing for a real good philosopher like the European ones, the solid guys with substance. Like we all do, I think, as we grow older. And I thought about this, young people do not recall a glorious previous era because they're too young. They cannot remember, or they haven't experienced a glorious era that should be recreated and that was better than what is today. But I think as we grow older, we have such eras that we can look back to and say, that ideal period, we should recreate the world in that image today. And I think the sad thing is that that golden era never was. We just remember it in a certain way. But that's another topic for a philosopher, much more able than I am to dwell on. The authors of this article with the title, How We Lost the Sky, it's a German guy, Weisbrode, and then a lady, Heather Jung, a Chinese last name. They make the point in a somewhat convoluted way, but in an interesting way, that somewhere, and they have research to back it up apparently, somewhere during the middle of the previous century, our relationship with the sky started to change radically. And they say it's a complex process with many things contributing to that. It has to do with the development of aviation, but more so with the space age. And there's interesting things that they said that changed. The absolutes of the earth and the sky, as absolutes, they changed to something much more relative. Because, for instance, you are able not to look only up to the sky, but to look down from the sky through a satellite at your own house, for instance. And it's wonderful to play around with Google Earth or other things to look at, let's say, your house or the church from many different angles. 3D, satellite, map, you can pick. They say that changed our relationship with the sky. The sky originally from the word in Norse, the ancient Norse ski, which means cloud, suggesting something mysterious, something that is not accessible for people, and that mystery that almost universally in all human cultures conveys something of the presence of God or gods. So that the sky originally was also for modern humans a place of the gods, inaccessible to us, place that we would look up to, that carried mystery with it and something interesting for our imagination. Because they say, these authors say, that is the biggest loss, and they call it the bankruptcy of the imagination of the early 21st century, the bankruptcy of the human imagination in the 21st century. Because they say the sky, which was the place of the God, the mysterious, the inaccessible, has become a junkyard filled with a jetsam and a flotsam of the space age, with satellites abounding and all kinds of space debris just floating around. And the sky is no longer the place filled with mystery and the place of the sacred and where the gods dwell, but it is this junkyard that is supposed to be a bridge to space and to the sky, but that has become, because it is a junkyard, more of a filter, and a very tight filter, and something that prevents us from reaching beyond this junkyard. It has become mundane, ordinary, something filled with utilitarian objects, and it has become all functional, devoid of dreams and of the imagination. A troubling declaration. And I read it and I put it aside, and it stayed with me. And somewhere this made a connection for me with the passage that Alison read from the book of Acts, where Paul, the Apostle Paul, on the Areopagus, a hill to the west of the Acropolis in Athens, where a council or a court, also called the Areopagus, where they regularly met in ancient Athens, where he was delivering a speech, an address, the second big one that he was delivering according to the author of Acts, which is also the author of the Gospel of Luke. And he was talking about the religiosity, the piousness of the Athenians. And he did what most missionaries do, or good speakers do. They try to find something that the audience will be familiar with, and then you latch onto that, and you use that as your platform from which to launch yourself into whatever you have to say. Most missionaries do that in Africa as well. For instance, in southern Africa, in that mythology of the Bantu, or the southern Bantu people, let's take the Zulu. The highest god is called Nkulunkulu. And it means the God that was there in the beginning, created everything, and then sort of retrieved into retirement. That God is still in charge, but in a very remote way, and the best image I could come up with when looking at the image of Nkulunkulu was, somebody enjoying retirement. Not doing much, just sitting there sipping whatever favorite beverage there is, and, perhaps smoking a pipe, rocking on the porch if it's not too humid, like it often is these days. And missionaries would take Nkulunkulu and equate that with God the Father in the Trinity. And then it was easy for the Zulus to say, okay, we know about Nkulu, we know about the Father. But then the Father in our Trinity would become similar to Nkulunkulu, somebody sitting out there, not doing much, just enjoying retirement. So Paul did something similar. He saw this altar of the Greeks the ancient Greeks, to the unknown God. And he said, you are worshiping this God. And when I recall that, I almost felt, Paul, why are you doing this? This is the altar to the unknown God. This is, after I read the article, this mystery of the realm beyond the gods, the normal gods of the Athenians, which dwelt on the mountain Olympus, and which had many human characteristics. But this God was different. It was from a realm of mystery, of that sky, the cloud beyond what is accessible to humans. And I almost wanted to say, Paul, why did you do that? For the Athenians destroy this wonder about sky, the realm beyond what is accessible and what is normal, what is mundane, what is utilitarian. Looking at us today, us sitting here, as a nation, as a world society. And thinking about Paul talking about the unknown God that he made known to the Athenians, I wonder to what extent the verdict of the authors of that article, How We Lost the Sky, is true. To what extent we are experiencing the death, or at least the critical illness of imagination. That we have resigned ourselves to a state of despair or near despair. That we have stopped and ceased wondering, especially in a spiritual and a moral sense. That we have resigned ourselves to what is and say, this is the way the world is, I can do nothing about it. To what extent have we accepted that even though they called the sky the junkyard of space debris, that can no longer function as the bridge to get us beyond that and to the sky, the place of mystery, the place where the sacred can still live and can still dwell. To what extent that bridge to the sky has for all of us also become a bridge too far. If there ever was a need for us to rekindle imagination, for us to be open to dream again, to imagine a world that is different, to imagine a world that is better. Like John Lennon said, imagine. And he sings about, if there was no heaven, just sky. And if there was no hell beneath us, imagine everybody, just all the people, just living for today. I do not agree with Lennon in the sense of just living for today. I agree with him, but I think he can sing it with more enthusiasm about imagine, with greater commitment. Because even in that passage of Paul, that the author of Acts assigned to Paul, he speaks about the unknown God through which we have our being and through which we exist and through which we live and in which we live. So that Paul there speaks not of the distant God that we have put beyond our reach, like Nkulunkulu that is in retirement because our imagination has ceased to work at it to come up with new and appropriate God concepts for our age that cannot be touched and destroyed by science, but that cooperate with science in a joint venture to again imagine and reach out and dream of the wonders, of the sacred, of the sky, the mysterious cloud that is God, no longer out there, but in us and with us. And we have it in our traditional thinking of the church. If we can just, I think, open our eyes and look at it in a way that I think is appropriate, and an imaginative way for our age and the time that we live in. We know about Emmanuel, God with us, when Jesus walked among us, when the ancients, the early Christians, took the three-layered universe and the realm of God, the upper story, when they said that's no longer valid, that is the only place where God dwells or where the gods are, that barrier, that boundary is suspended through Jesus that came to earth. And it was confirmed through what is the account that we find about the Pentecost. The Spirit with us, and according to our own scriptures, our sacred text, the Spirit in us. No longer God out there, but God in us and with us. And it is time for us to live from that reality as Christians. To imagine again, to dream again about the world that will come into being. When we stay true to what we profess to believe, that the God of love, as Paul said, that was there from the beginning, and through which we live and through which we have our existence, in which we exist. That Spirit will create the world that we cannot even imagine. We have to reclaim the sky in the sense of the sacred that hallows everyday life, every moment of it, our full existence. We have to say with Paul, the unknown God in and through which we exist is with us always. Let us work together as God's people. Imagine, dream, live and exist in and through that God of love, so that the world that Jesus imagined, that he called the kingdom of God, may come alive increasingly through us and around us, so that our imagination may not be in critical condition, or as the authors of the article said, in bankruptcy, but alive and life-giving and nurturing, and leading us and through us the world to that place that we can dare to dream of. May God's Spirit lead us there. Amen.